Thank you, and welcome everyone to today's Healthcare IT News webinar, 4 Reasons Why Your Infrastructure Needs a Refresh. Today's event is sponsored by Nutanix. As noted, I'm Tom Sullivan, and I'll be your moderator. Now, the healthcare industry is under pressure to transform IT operations in the face of new technologies and increased regulation. As healthcare organizations work hard to simplify operations and add new applications and services, however, legacy IT infrastructure is no longer able to meet those needs. So during this webinar, you will learn how leading healthcare organizations are using enterprise cloud solutions to elevate IT and focus on the applications and services that actually power healthcare. To that end, today's speakers are Don Mims, Director of Infrastructure and Virtualization at Baylor University, and Dan Cohen, Global Healthcare Director at Nutanix. With that, I'll hand it over to you, Dan, to begin today's webinar.
Thanks, Tom. I appreciate it. And thanks, everybody, for joining. So, as Tom said, I'm responsible for our healthcare vertical here at Nutanix. I work with a lot of application partners and help define our strategy in the healthcare business. If any of you want to follow up directly with me, maybe a question doesn't get answered later on, just shoot me an email. It's dcowan@nutanix.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn, and I'd be happy to help. So I'm just going to talk for a few minutes and give you an overview of what Nutanix is and what we're doing in healthcare, and then I'll hand it over to Don. I think that's why we're all here, is to hear what Baylor Scott White is doing with this type of technology in their environment. So before I start, let me just give you a high level of how we're organized here at Nutanix around healthcare. We've decided that because of the life-critical nature of applications in the provider space, so within hospitals and health systems, physician practices, specialty centers around surgery or radiology, that's where we're putting the majority of our efforts. We realize there's other sub-segments within healthcare, pharmaceuticals and life sciences, payer. We do a lot of business in those markets as well. But when it comes to building out our dedicated healthcare team and building partnerships, we're really focused on the provider market. I'm going to go ahead and get started here and tell you a little bit about Nutanix. We're just a few years old, founded in 2009, but we've had some really rapid growth, as you can see here. We're over 7,000 customers. We've got customers around the world, and our employee set is growing pretty rapidly as well. And we're building specialty expertise in industries like healthcare. So what do we do here at Nutanix? Let me build out this slide real quick. So on the left, you will see the traditional way of building out infrastructure in a data center. So servers, storage fabric, so fiber channel switches, network switches, and then also storage arrays underneath those, and then virtualization and applications on top. That's the way we've done it for a long time. And it worked really well for a long time, and it allowed us to do things with virtualization like move virtual machines around because we had shared storage behind them. But there's a lot of complexity there, right? There's a lot of connections, as you can see in that diagram. There's various manufacturers. Your server manufacturer is probably going to be different than your storage array manufacturer versus your fabric manufacturer as well. So support can become problematic at the same time. So what we've done is we've collapsed all that functionality down into an appliance. And you truly do get all the same functionality. You get all the data protection, replication, high performance, high availability, but you get it in a much more manageable form factor. And we do that through the use of our software. So using commodity servers with really fast storage, very close to the CPU, and our software on top gives you fantastic performance and a great experience, much easier to manage, single pane of glass, much easier to support, and it really does provide the same functionality that the traditional way of doing things did at a much lower total cost of ownership and just simpler approach. So that's what Nutanix is all about. We call it hyper-converged infrastructure. That's the industry term that we coined. And then as we expand out on our capabilities, we're building what we call the Enterprise Cloud, which is giving you cloud-like capabilities, but within the control of your own data center. So these Nutanix appliances that you see here that scale one node at a time are traditionally deployed in your data center. So you've got the security, the compliance control around that you like to have with your traditional infrastructure. But it gives you a simple cloud-like experience. All right. I talked a little, just to mention briefly the ability to scale, and that is really, really important. So we start as small as 3 nodes, and we get linear scalability as we add nodes to the cluster. And that supports a variety of workloads. So you could be adding nodes to support virtual desktops or SQL databases, or maybe there's a merger going on in your health system, or maybe you acquired 2 hospitals. You need to add capacity for Citrix users, for example, or database users. We scale 1 node at a time and in a very linear, predictable fashion. So customers are able to buy what they need when they need it. They don't have to buy lots and lots of hardware up front that will support them for the next 5 years. They just buy what they need to get started, and they can add bit by bit as they need it. So much different approach to buying infrastructure than we had with the traditional 3-tier approach. So to go a little bit deeper into what we're doing in healthcare, we've got over 800 healthcare customers today, and I mentioned that we're in a variety of sub-markets within healthcare, so pharmaceuticals and payers. More than half of this 800 is in the provider market, so hospitals and health systems running their most critical applications on Nutanix. And I'll talk a little bit about what those applications are and where we've created partnerships as well. So some of the benefits of our platform within healthcare. I talked about the flexibility and the simplified management, truly a single pane of glass to manage that infrastructure that your virtual machines and your applications run on. You get full visibility into the virtualization layer, the compute, and the storage all in one place. And they are physically together, right? They're not separated and connected via cabling like we had in the past. The ability to start small and scale as needed is really, really important. When a newer technology like hyperconverged comes into a risk-averse industry like healthcare, people want to start small, right? They don't want to forklift lots of gear out of their data center and replace it with something new. So they start with a small Nutanix cluster and get comfortable with it, and they grow from there. We've seen that happen across our customer base. We enable critical healthcare applications. So I'll talk a little bit more about that, both EHR and clinical imaging and genomics workloads and other things that are vitally important to your business. Increased ROI. So the return on investment of our solution once it replaces their traditional 3-tier approach is pretty profound. And then reduction in total cost of ownership. Smaller footprint saves you data center space, less power, easier to manage. So fewer people have to manage this compared to the old way of doing things, and those people can go work. Additional people can go work on more interesting projects, right? So work on strategic initiatives for the organization, things that may not be getting attention today. Could be a new analytics project, could be a security initiative that you're lacking headcount. But if you can free up headcount that was traditionally managing infrastructure to go do those more interesting things, there's true real value there. So some of the applications that our customers are running, we've got a list of dozens and dozens of healthcare applications that are running on Nutanix around the world. Here's just a subset of those. You'll see a mix of EMRs for smaller organizations, EMRs for larger organizations, some imaging, some PACS and VNA, and also enterprise content management. So it's a real variety of applications that run on our platform. Basically anything that can be virtualized today. So any application component that can be run in a virtual machine today can run on Nutanix. And it'll run just as well or better than it did on your traditional 3-tier infrastructure. So we'll talk a little bit about partnerships in a little more detail. So you saw some of these logos on the previous slide, but these are example of 4 software vendors where we've invested quite a bit of time. So Epic being first, and that's the EMR that Baylor Scott White, Don Mims' organization, is migrating to. And we're really far along with Epic. We're validated for the entire presentation tier, also their services tier, and we're starting to configure systems for customers wanting to run the Cogito or Clarity family of analytics on our platform. We're also in the lab for the Cache database. So we've got a pretty good list of customers running Epic workloads on our platform today, and actually Epic is a customer of ours. So they run their developers' virtual desktops on Nutanix in-house. Cerner and Meditech are two more of the leading EMR vendors where we're validated for the front end of those applications, working on other workloads. So Cerner CareAware, the medical device connectivity suite, has been tested in the Cerner lab as well. And then Meditech, we're actually doing some development work with Meditech and their backup providers to provide a fully fledged, official supported solution of Meditech on Nutanix. And then InterSystems, which we see somewhat in the U.S. With their HealthShare product and also the Cache database, but we see quite a bit outside the U.S. with the TrackCare EMR. The entire InterSystems stack is fully supported on our platform, and we're working on refreshing some white paper type documentation for customers that are interested in running those applications on our platform. So that's just a example of 4 of the leading vendors that are fully supported on Nutanix. So I think this is the last slide, but the purpose of this slide is to kind of tie it together and show you the connection between what we do with our hyperconverged product and what you do when it comes to delivering care. So I talked about simplifying the infrastructure, removing a lot of the components and a lot of the connectivity that was required with 3-tier. We also have quite a bit of automation and self-healing built into our platform. So our platform knows if there's a drive failure, for example, it'll move virtual machines based on hardware failures, and then it'll move them back once components have been repaired. So there's a lot of automation built into it. And what that really means is that there's less human interaction required with the system. And as we all know, there's a lot of outages and degraded performance caused in data centers because of what people do to the system inadvertently. So we remove a lot of the human touch that's required on the systems, and that drives up the availability of the infrastructure and therefore the availability of the application, which is what really matters, which allows clinicians to have more access to the application during the week, during the year, right? There's fewer times of degraded performance and there's fewer outages because there's a lot less complexity in the underlying infrastructure than there has been in the past. So I want to make sure we close out with that to show you that connection between this innovative new technology and what really matters, which is delivering care to patients. So with that, I will wrap up. Happy to take any questions once we finish up with Don's portion. And with that, I'll hand it over to Don Nems from Baylor Scott White. Thanks a lot.
All right, thanks, Dan. I appreciate that. And thanks for all the participants that joined today. I'm really excited that you're here and have interest in the Baylor Scott White story around how we have implemented hyperconverged successfully. So I'll get started. A quick introduction. I am the Director of Server Infrastructure for Baylor. I'm responsible for all of virtualization, both Citrix and VMware, as well as Linux and host systems. We became the largest not-for-profit healthcare organization in the state of Texas back in 2013 when we merged with Scott White Health, created about an $8 billion healthcare organization. And today we have almost 50 hospitals, 10,000 physicians, and almost 50,000 employees, as well as our own health plan. And it's a very large and continuing to grow organization. We stretch from the DFW area all the way down into Austin, Round Rock region, and are continuing to buy clinics and look for mergers and acquisitions along the way. So it's an ever-evolving environment. Moving on, there's a couple of topics that I'm going to talk to you guys about today, both on the technology front as well as organizationally. And there's a couple of things around lessons learned that early on I wish I would have known, and we've kind of grown into the solutions that we've implemented over time. And hopefully some of these nuggets that I'm giving you today will be beneficial for everyone on the call as you go down this path. So getting started. As you move into a compute shift with your organization, some things that you should do in advance of really changing your compute footprint is looking organizationally and working on organizational alignment. It's one of the things looking back I think that would have helped us really gotten out of the gate much quicker. Bringing in teams in advance, for example, storage and network, to really understand the solution, understand how it impacts their areas, and the changes that they'll potentially need to make as you bring in this modernization. Because really, hyperconverged, Nutanix specifically, is not just a continuation of your existing compute platform. It's really a modernization of how you do things, and it's a shift in how you move forward. So one of the things I'm looking at doing is over time building these cross-functional teams to include members of network, members of storage, members of the backup team and server team, to really come together and drive this solution as a single product and not from specific silos, which in most enterprise organizations, that's how IT is really segmented. You have network and telecom, compute, storage, and backups. And each of those groups kind of operate independently with just a little overlap. But I think building a converged team to align with a converged strategy would really help organizationally plan and grow this solution moving forward. Also the buy-in. If you bring folks together in advance of implementing a solution like this and let them know and understand what the benefits of the solution are, the ability to implement and grow this thing over time is going to be a lot easier. So something to think about if you've already started down the hyperconverged route or are just now thinking about bringing in this technology. Bring in all of these surrounding teams as early as you can, and I think it'll help you be a lot more successful. So a little bit about our current environment. We have a lot of traditional compute. We have a lot of Dell blades, rack mount servers, as well as Cisco UCS, and a mixture of rack mount in the Cisco space, and then traditional SAN. Some things we were trying to achieve were, with all those mixed environments, we were trying to come up with a way to simplify environment management, and having a mixed environment of Dell with their management tools and Cisco with their management tools and all the work on the SAN that is required to keep that environment up to date really created a lot of complexity. And I'm sure folks on the call, your organization might be having the same challenges as we are, but staff continues to get minimized. The time that we're expected to deliver projects continues to shrink, and it's hard to accomplish everything you're needing to do with a complex environment that needs a lot of care and feeding at the same time. So simplifying tasks for server provisioning and server build out, as well as improving the speed of delivery of this infrastructure is very important to us, and became something that we put on the forefront of our radar to try to make some gains in. Also, as you know, healthcare IT is not a profit organization. Healthcare IT is a cost center, and the only way really that you can make big improvements and gains in this space is to show the benefits of your solutions to the business and let them know how it's going to improve the final outcomes in the healthcare space. So the way that we positioned this strategy was around, from a clinical perspective, the ability to improve application access to data for physicians. So creating environments that would allow them to get to their data faster, which would allow them then to come up with a diagnosis and then information back to their patients and then create patient satisfaction so that we get those return visits. Improved environment stability. One of the things we were really focusing on was having a consistent, stable environment where we, as an IT organization, didn't impact physician workflow or clinical access to data. And then also having the capability to do non-disruptive management and maintenance of our environment. Uptime is very important, and as much as we can do to keep our environment updated and consistent, but at the same time not impact patient care or clinical access to data, is something that we hold very important. And then lastly, the speed of delivery. Again, physicians and clinical users hold us very accountable to delivering new applications, as they request, or new environments as they need. And the ability to deliver those quickly and efficiently is very important. So what made us consider Nutanix specifically? And after meeting with them over a period of time, hearing their product vision, not only around their initial offering of a hyperconverged solution, but their long-term strategy with cloud, connecting to other providers, automation, all of that functionality was very important to us, and it showed that they were very innovative in this space, not only around their own products, but with integration into other systems that we currently run. For example, ServiceNow is our ticketing system where all of our incidents, tasks, requests, and those things get entered into, and the integration with ServiceNow to eventually allow us to build a self-service portal where we could improve our data entry and then server provisioning and then delivery of those end products is very important. And we've started down that road currently and hope to have a working prototype here in the next couple of months with plans to move that to a production state long term. Again, we ultimately selected Nutanix for the vision and the product features. We assessed a couple of other products in this same space, vSAN and SimpliVity at the time. And what we found is there's a long list of similar features when you start looking at products in the hyperconverged space. Many customers and many products match up on a lot of the same areas. It was the differences in those areas that didn't match up, and the progress that Nutanix made in those specific areas that made us choose them as a hyperconverged vendor. So I want to take you through a little bit about how we got to where we're at today, and I'll give you some ideas on the size of our Nutanix footprint. So really we looked at this as a three-phase approach, with the first phase being very use case driven. The first few implementations of Nutanix was driven by a need around either compute, storage capacity, or performance. So on the presentation, I've listed an example of some applications that we started out with on this platform. A clinical app, 3M360, they had a requirement for storage, a very large amount of storage, which would have been very expensive for them to do in a traditional SAN environment. And we saved them a considerable amount of money on the Nutanix platform, and also delivered not only the storage component, but the compute as well, and in a dual data center designed to allow them to not only have what they need, but also create a DR environment for them. A second use case was the distribution center. About a year back, we built, Baylor Healthcare built a distribution center down in Waco to be the centralized hub for all equipment that was received for the organization. They had a requirement for on-prem, I guess a data center, an on-prem data center in the distribution center. It wasn't really feasible to bring in an attached storage array plus all the compute environment, switches and routers and all those things to build an entire suite. So we brought in Nutanix, and in a 6-node configuration with, in this case, we used ESX as the hypervisor, built out a virtualized space, very small footprint, very easy to manage, and they've been running an Amazon-like distribution center off of that platform for about the last year. It's been very efficient and bulletproof, and we've had no issues with it since the day of implementation. We've continued to grow. There's a product called Miafora, which is a new product for Baylor. It's a genome sequencing application that had traditionally been an outsourced solution. The physicians had been using it for a while, but were very dissatisfied with the functionality that it provided, the speed that it was delivering as far as the ability to crunch data and analyze and look at the data that the sequencing information was being provided as. So they came to us and asked for our help. So we brought in Nutanix, and we worked with the Miafora vendor and really put together a solution that hadn't been done with that product in the past, and set up a dual data center environment that hosted this platform. It's a Linux-based operating system platform on Nutanix, and we created an environment that provided better functionality. They allowed them to sequence and get results on their studies much more quickly, and to get those results to to the physicians that were looking for the data more efficiently. We also set up a DR scenario for this environment as well with automated failover and protected it both from a high availability perspective as well as a disaster recovery perspective. It was very successful, and not only internally, it's been very stable, but we continue to work with the vendor to try to help them build a solution for the future. And then most recently, our Citrix XenApp deployment. We got to a point where our legacy environment was aging and ready for refresh. This is the environment that hosts our enterprise Epic application. And if you're in the healthcare space, I'm sure you're familiar with Epic as an EHR. So we recently purchased 142 1U Nutanix hosts to support once the build out is complete, about 35,000 concurrent user sessions delivering Epic Hyperspace. We've currently got half of that environment built out today. We've been doing some testing on that platform over the last few weeks to just measure and monitor utilization for performance. And sometime next week, I believe around Monday afternoon, we'll be moving over a production workload, about 650 XenApp virtual sessions over to that platform for Epic Prod. Long term, this will be our enterprise environment for all of our clinical users to access the EHR between our Dallas region and our Temple Austin region. We're looking forward to this, and we feel like this is going to be something that provides a lot of benefit to our clinical users. So after we work through these three phases of deployment, or this first phase, we move into our phase 2 now, which is kind of general compute. We're refreshing all of our ESX hosted environment on Cisco with Nutanix, and we're also bringing our Linux workload over as well. And we plan to host our Linux virtual workload on the Acropolis hypervisor. So this will be our first interaction with Acropolis as a hypervisor, and we hope to see good progress there. And long term, if we do, we will continue to use Acropolis and eventually over time reduce our footprint with VMware as a substitute. And then phase 3, server modernization, which is once we have a good comfort level with the products that we have implemented, we will continue to grow Nutanix as the standard solution across the enterprise moving forward, and that'll be our year-over-year target for growth and refresh. So just a few questions I added here that people might be interested in. How do the deployments go and deployments and implementation go with Nutanix? I have to say they've been a really great partner to work with. The implementation services that we've used along the way have been top-notch. Their staff are experts in that space and are able to work through any challenges that we've come across. Everything up to date has really been a good experience. Did they meet or exceed our expectations? I would say for me, dealing with other customer or other vendors along the way with different products and different solutions, I would say they've exceeded our expectations. Again, the speed to delivery on these hosts has been amazing. For example, the 71 hosts that we stood up in Temple for the ESX or for the Citrix environment, we stood those up after having them configured and connected to the network ports. It was about a 4-hour turnaround to have all those hosts configured and built out, and within a day we had test workload running on that platform, and we've never been able to do that from a hardware perspective in the past. And I would say that third bullet point, what surprised you, I think that was one of the biggest surprises that I've had, is the ability to turn up an environment that large so quickly with so little issue. So some technical results and improvements that we achieved or that we're looking to achieve with the product. One of the things I talked about earlier is reducing our footprint and saving a considerable amount of money is on the VMware licensing front. Looking to grow our Acropolis footprint and continue to feel comfortable in that space. We want to decrease engineer time from a management perspective and have engineers focusing more on projects and delivering outcomes and provisioning environments rather than spending a lot of time managing hardware, managing software upgrades, things like that. I really like the Prism interface. Having that single pane of glass to look across all of your different workloads has been really great. And even though they're disparate instances, one at a distribution center, 2 or 3 in a data center in the north, 2 or 3 in a data center in Central Texas, one pane of glass is really great to have when you're looking at storage and compute metrics and things like that. The consolidation of IT silos, breaking down those walls, getting those teams integrated, everybody having a input into this shared environment is something that I'd really like to continue to grow long term. Bringing products to market faster, and I think that's one of the major things that I'd really like to do. And we live in a world today where everything is on demand. You can have a car show up at your house by pushing a button on your phone. You can have a pizza in 10 minutes. I mean, things like that are what we expect now. So we get used to those types of things, and the ability to deliver servers, deliver applications, deliver to our customers quickly in this space is something that we're going to continually have to work to achieve. And then having more time to focus on business strategy. That's very important because we have to continue to think long term, not just working in the moment. And thinking long term gives you the ability to continue to work with your vendor partners, understand the functionality that they're going to be bringing in the future, and how that can affect and improve your business as it stands today. So freeing up time and doing more with less is really something very important to me long term. Again, this is kind of touching on our experiences with the tools. I get a lot of feedback from our engineers that work in the Prism interface, testing the Acropolis piece. Very good feedback. The support, again, has been great. I've even recently had an experience myself where I called into support just to find out what that process feels like, and I have to say it's been top notch all the way through. So again, we did look at some other offerings, vSAN and SimpliVity early on. We do have some implementations of vSAN currently in some small remote clinics that came with the acquisition. We're looking at, as those environments phase out, we'll probably look at Nutanix remote office type solutions just to continue our integration and the standardization of that platform. And in general, if you're considering hyperconverged, I would say you definitely should look at it. I think it's where we're going. It's the future of compute and storage. So HCI in general, I would recommend it. And then I would say from Nutanix perspective, it's a product that's worked very well for us. We're very happy with what we've received so far and very excited about the future of the product and how we're going to continue to integrate with it. It does, and we've seen it already, simplify our management environment. We're consolidating support needs, making things easier. The one-click upgrades and the ability to do non-disruptive work on that platform has been an amazing feature. And as things change, especially the storage changes with different offerings, you have to consider the compute and storage all in one containerized solution, and the ability to grow that modularly over time is something that's very powerful to us as well. So that wraps up my piece of the presentation. I hope you guys that listen get a lot of good information out of that, and I'll be glad to answer any questions as we complete this interview.
Thank you both, Don and Dan. And I'd just like to remind the audience that everyone can enter questions by using the Ask a Question panel on your screen and hitting the Submit button. We do have a couple questions that have come in already, and I'll give this one to you. First, Don, as far as the implementation of Nutanix at Baylor Scott White, what were your biggest challenges with change management?
That's a good question. Really, we haven't had a lot of challenges. We consider this from an infrastructure perspective, similar to what we've already implemented. Just from a change perspective, it's physical hardware installed in a data center with a software component that merges the storage into a single unified unit. We manage change exactly like we do today. We take VMs from existing workloads, for example, on Cisco hardware. We migrate those VMs onto this platform. There's really been no difference in the way that we manage change from a change management perspective. The biggest challenge, like I said earlier in my overview was the change around teams and how they integrate or don't integrate with this new solution.
So as a follow-up to that, because you mentioned bringing in surrounding teams as early as possible, we talked about compute, telecom, IT more broadly. What's the secret to getting everyone to prioritize participation in hyperconvergence? What have you learned along the way?
I think the biggest lesson we've learned is to get people involved early, bring them into any opportunity where there's knowledge sharing, there's training, especially around the storage team. And looking back, that was one of the larger areas that we had the most, not really resistance, just uncertainty. The storage team is very threatened by this solution because it is a difference and a shift from traditional storage management, and they didn't understand how it interacted or how it was different or the same as what they did today. So we had many meetings over the first few months with storage, and finally worked out that that in this case, the server team, since it was a converged solution, would be responsible for the storage components in this environment. But at the same time, we continue to have weekly meetings with storage where we introduce them to the interface. We show them how to navigate in Prism so they feel comfortable with the solution. And eventually, over time, as I mentioned, building those converged teams, at some point, there might be some shared access and some shared responsibility in this space as well.
Thank you. And now here's one for you, Dan. An audience member wants to know, what are some of the healthcare partnerships that Nutanix has? You, of course, mentioned Epic, Cerner, Meditech, and InterSystems. Are there others in existence? Are there others in the works?
Yeah, the ones that I would add to that list are around imaging, so PACS and VNA. So Dustin Segura is a industry expert who's on our team now, came from Citrix in healthcare, and he's focused on the imaging partners. So starting to work more closely with vendors like Merge and McKesson, Infinite, specifically in the PACS and VNA space. You know, the benefits that we're seeing or customers are seeing running those workloads on our platform is the simplified management, right? It's the same things that Don talked about. We've got some work to do when it comes to the archiving capabilities. We provide, you know, really fast storage performance to virtual machines. We need to do better when it comes to the cheap and deep, the long-term archive. And as our hardware options expand and our density improves, we'll be better there. But right now, for the cache, short-term cache components of PACS and then the application of virtual machines, we're a great fit. And we're spending quite a bit of time with those PACS vendors that I mentioned.
Good to know. Thank you. And you also listed a number of apps running on Nutanix. What are the most commonly used of those by hospitals?
Well, I would say it's not so much the applications. I would say the most common use case or workload that we've seen is VDI. And that's because VDI in healthcare is really nice. It allows you to do follow-me desktops and roaming within for clinicians with tap and go. But VDI is difficult to architect for. So the three-tier way of doing things, even with an all-flash array, is difficult to scale in a VDI environment. And so that's one of the reasons that Nutanix got off the ground a few years ago, is that we made VDI infrastructure easy. So we still have quite a few customers that start with VDI on Nutanix. They like the Nutanix experience, and then they expand beyond that to other workloads. So that's the one that I would highlight.
Thank you. And Don, I knew I would get that confused at some point. You also suggested showing the benefits of hyperconvergence to the business. And as we all know, the business side of hospitals and other organizations, those people don't always understand tech. And don't always understand tech language. So given that, what are some of the tactics or tricks you've learned to show those benefits successfully?
That's a great question. You know, a lot of the things that we do, you have to really talk in their terms and make, you know, when you present to them, really show that how the benefits directly impact them. So not talking about the technology, but more the functionality around, you know, how we're going to be able to manage this environment and provide non-disruptive ways to do that. and show the benefit that they'll never have a downtime, not only from a planned change, but also how we're going to reduce any impacts from a non-planned change. We also talk about the ability to improve performance in certain situations, which would allow the clinical users to get to data and applications running smoother and access to data being faster. Those are all the things that they like to hear. So many times in a healthcare environment, applications that we run are aged or older, or a lot of our application vendors don't keep up with versioning or upgrades and things like that. So anything that we can do from an infrastructure perspective that makes their life easier, they like to hear that. So we really sell it as a platform to make what they do easier day to day, and we also get the benefits of it from an IT perspective because it makes the things that we do easier as well.
Makes sense. Thank you. Now, before we move into closing thoughts here, Dan, one more question for you. You discussed building the enterprise cloud and deploying it on-premise at a customer site. You also listed a number of advantages to that, but just to get them all in one kind of succinct place for our attendees today. So what are the advantages of having that cloud, that hyperconvergence on-site?
One important advantage is the proximity to the users and to other systems, right? So we don't have standalone departmental systems anymore. They're all talking to other systems that are probably already in your data center. So keeping those close together so your network latency is as low as it can be is important. Network latency from the user to the application is important. If you've got a critical application in the cloud somewhere, you may end up with some slowness. And then just keeping things within your own control, right? Not having to depend on an organization to sign a business associates agreement that might not have much teeth to it. Having things within your data center so you don't have to worry about BAAs, and if third party's data center is high trust certified, there's quite a bit of value there. The reason people go to the public cloud is because it's easy, right? I can spin up an application really, really quickly, and the cost is predictable. Well, if we can provide those two benefits on-prem, there's a lot of value there, right? So that's what I think about when I think about the difference between an on-prem enterprise cloud deployment versus a public cloud.
Excellent, thank you. And at this point, it is time for closing thoughts here. So, Dan, I'll let you go first. What's your best piece of advice for attendees when considering overhauling or refreshing their infrastructure?
Well, I would just, if you're already an infrastructure person, you're probably already familiar with hyperconverged. So if you have any questions, be sure to follow up with us. If you're an applications person or in some other part of the business, I would encourage you to ask your technology teams, your IT directors, your systems managers, what's their private cloud strategy? What's their strategy for hyperconverged? Because they really should have one by now, and they really should be looking for opportunities to pick out workloads in the environment where maybe there's some aging hardware or some performance issues in places where it might make sense to go on hyperconverged. So I would just encourage people to get those conversations going within your organization.
Sounds like good advice. Don, what would you leave today's attendees with?
I would just say that you should definitely look down this road and look at this product. It has definitely made some improvements in our infrastructure. We've seen efficiencies not only from a management perspective but from performance as well, and we're looking forward to the next chapter.
And that does conclude the Q&A part of this webinar. So I'd like to thank you once again, Dan and Don. Great job on the presentations today. And of course, I'd like to thank our attendees for coming as well, and let everyone know to please be sure to complete the evaluation that will pop up on your screen. And as a reminder, today's session will be available on demand until October 27th, 2018 through the HIMSS Learning Center. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great day.